Welcome to sleep with myth. Before the world fell quiet, the gods spoke in everything. In thunder and river, in the song of wind through trees, their words wrapped around creation like a veil of light. But voices fade, even those born of eternity. At first, humanity did not notice. The sun still rose, the sea still moved, and they believed the heavens still watched. But in time, the prayers went unanswered, and the echoes of worship fell into stillness. 1,000 temples became dust. Altars grew cold, their fires smothered by the hands that once kept them alive. Only the silence remained, vast, unbroken, endless. Yet somewhere in that silence, a pulse still moved, soft, rhythmic, like the breath of something sleeping. The gods had not died. They had simply grown quiet. And in that quiet, they waited for humanity to learn the one truth they had never understood. That silence, too, is a kind of language. When the last voice of the heavens faded, the world changed. The priests tore their robes and begged for thunder. Kings ordered new altars to be built. But no prayer could pierce the quiet sky. Still the silence endured, not cruel, not empty, but heavy, like the pause between a breath and a word never spoken. Far away, in a desert untouched by time, a lone wanderer found a ruin. No statues, no idols, no light. Only a vast hall of stone, its walls etched with words so faint they could barely be seen. He entered and felt it immediately, the weight of presence without sound. Each step echoed softly, and the air itself seemed to listen. He knelt at the center, closed his eyes, and for the first time in his life did not pray. He only listened, and within that listening, he heard something deeper than words, a memory ancient and pure, that whispered not to the ear, but to the soul, said nothing, and yet he understood everything. The silence was not absence. It was the gods themselves, speaking in the only voice that could never be misheard. In the centuries after the gods fell silent, the world began to listen in new ways. Mountains hummed with a low, steady tone, a remnant of divine speech carved deep into their hearts. Every river carried echoes of prayers long forgotten, their flow soft as sighs. In a hidden valley, a temple still stood, carved from the bones of the earth itself. No songs, no chants, no bells rang within its walls. Only stillness. But beneath that stillness, something waited. Pilgrims came not to pray, but to be silent. They would kneel before the great stone figure at the center, a statue of no god known to man, its face smooth, its mouth closed. And as they knelt, the air grew dense. Thoughts faded. Breath slowed. Each heart began to beat in rhythm with the unseen pulse beneath the floor. Those who stayed long enough said they could feel the world breathe with them, that the stone was alive, not watching, not judging, simply listening. One night, a young pilgrim placed her hand upon the statue's chest. It was cold at first, but then warmth bloomed beneath her palm, a faint vibration, like the echo of a heartbeat. And in that moment she understood. The gods had not fallen into silence out of wrath or abandonment. They had become the silence itself. Every pause, every moment between one sound and the next, was their final gift, a space where the mortal and divine could still meet. And the temple, that unmoving stone heart of the earth, was not a monument to lost gods. It was a reminder that even when words fade, presence remains. The silence deepened. It spread from the mountains to the seas, from the roots of trees to the stars themselves. It was not death, nor decay. It was rest. The world began to dream. The rivers slowed and shimmered like veins of glass. The wind moved as softly as breath, and even fire burned without sound. This glow steady, patient, eternal. In that dream, the gods lay beneath all things, not as rulers but as memory. They had folded themselves into every heartbeat, every grain of sand, every flicker of starlight. And as creation slept, the silence became sacred, for in that stillness, life began to listen. Plants turned toward the light without command. Creatures moved in rhythm with unseen tides. And humanity, wandering and wondering, felt for the first time that stillness was not empty. A child, born in a village forgotten by maps, looked to the horizon one night and asked her mother, "Why doesn't the sky speak anymore?" Her mother smiled and whispered, "It does. You just have to be quiet enough to hear it." And the child listened, truly listened. The wind brushed her cheek. The stars blinked like patient eyes. And beneath her feet, the earth sighed in contentment. In that moment, the silence of creation was no longer a mystery. It was a promise that the gods still dreamed, and through their dreaming the world endured. The silence lingered, long after the stars had learned to hum again. It lived not in the air, nor in the soil, but in memory, a soundless rhythm that only hearts could hear. In the vast emptiness between thoughts, humanity began to remember. They remembered the warmth that once wrapped the dawn, the hands that had shaped their souls from clay and breath, the voices that had taught them how to name the world. But those voices no longer commanded. They whispered. They hid in the lull between thunder and rain, in the echo of waves that kissed the shore and withdrew. Every temple had fallen. Every altar turned to dust. But within each mortal, a quiet ember pulsed, a light that refused to fade. The silence had become a language, and humanity unknowingly spoke it in their sleep. When they prayed, they no longer asked. They listened, and when they dreamed, they saw not gods above, but reflections of divinity within. The heavens, watching through their endless veil, smiled in stillness, for this was the moment they had awaited, when creation no longer needed its creators, because it had become creation itself. The silence was not the end of the gods. It was their evolution, the moment they became one with all things. In the stillness after time forgot to move, something stirred beneath the breath of existence. It was not a god as it once had been. No crown, no voice, no throne. It was the pulse that lived beneath everything, a rhythm too quiet for creation to hear. The last god had not vanished. It had simply fallen asleep within all living things. When the first rain touched the dust, it dreamed. When the wind brushed the mountains, it sighed. And when a human closed their eyes in wonder, it smiled, a faint echo of the divine heartbeat. The universe had folded inward, dreaming of itself endlessly. Stars burned not for worship, but for memory. Rivers flowed not for sacrifice, but for continuation. The silence was no longer a void. It was a song without sound, an eternal hum beneath reality. And in the dreams of humankind, where myth and memory met. The God within the silence whispered once more, "You were never alone. You are my dream, and I am yours." The stars brightened just slightly, as if they, too, remembered the warmth of that truth. And so the silence was no longer feared. It was embraced, for in its heart, all things still sang. Thank you for listening to Sleep with Myth.